we're going to start with Sharon Dietrich, who's a managing attorney at CLS. She was able to supply us with a client who became the subject of the first clemency video completed by the students in the Visual Legal Advocacy seminar. So she's fairly courageous with regard to VLA. So here's the wrap-up from Sharon.
Hi there. I have a sense that folks in this room would like to discuss and talk about what they've heard today and not just hear me talk. Am I right about that? People are going to have things to say and ruminations to be heard. All right, well, don't let me down. I'm going to try to discipline myself not to talk forever because I am really anxious to hear what other folks have to say about this whole subject. Regina tasked me with addressing the questions that she put forward at the beginning. I think I won't address them all because I don't think I can do justice to them that way. So I'm going to focus on a few of them. And I think particularly important, at the head of my list anyway, are two issues. One is the issue of what can we do with this technology as advocates? What areas should we be thinking about working in? And the second is, what are the resources for people like me to make use of this technology? And how can we come together to support folks that we're looking to support? Let me start by saying that I'm very struck after sitting through this today that the stuff that I learned in this room 20-odd years ago is obsolete. And you know, the way cases used to be tried back in the day, and the day was not that long ago, but for the centuries already, is that you had a seat and you had a judge and you had two tables and you put a witness in that seat and then another witness and they all tell their story. It would be a little like Rashomon maybe, where it's all being described verbally. And to some extent, to a large extent, it's still done that way today. But guess what? That is not the world we are living in anymore. And decision makers, I think, going forward, are not going to have the patience for that kind of thing. I don't think they're going to want to hear people describe things that can be shown to them. And I predict that it's not going to be long until all of us are doing the sort of things that the guys in the first session were talking about. Not the same way, and maybe not in the same formal settings, but I think that all of us are going to have to learn to use this technology if we don't want to be left behind. I mean, think of it. This is a world in which, I mean, who knew about YouTube 5 years ago, right? And now everybody looks at YouTube. Who knew? I still remember when I was a new lawyer, those 20 years ago at CLS, and somebody called me for my fax number, and I said, fax number? You think CLS has got a fax machine? Well, and of course, there's been a whole technological revolution since then, and it's only increasing in pace. It's not going any slower. So anyone who thinks that they don't have to deal with this and this is just some little nice way to spend the afternoon, I think is really in denial about where advocacy is going. And you're not going to be as good an advocate if you can't work with these types of media. So that's my personal opinion about what's happening. Two different types of ways for lawyers to think about using this technology strikes me. One is, for those of us who have individuals that we represent, how we use this technology in specific types of cases. The second is those of us who do policy work and larger impact work, how video advocacy can help us on that front. Let's start with the question of the smaller representations first, the individuals that we're looking to represent. Regina was a mentor of mine when I was here those 20-odd years ago, and I was delighted when she called me to say that she had this new Documentaries the Law course, and she was interested in hearing ideas I might have about what type of cases this might be useful for. And so I sat down and thought about what we do at CLS that might fit into this world, and I came up with the idea of doing a pardon video. And I had no idea that there, in fact, has been a history of doing clemency videos. I just thought that it made sense in the type of forum that my client was in. and that it made sense for my client and the obstacles that she faced in that particular body. Now, the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons consists of 5 people. I don't think any of them are from major metropolitan areas. One of them is the state attorney general, if that gives you a flavor. One is the lieutenant governor. She's actually quite sympathetic. But none of them were going to relate to my client and my client's life. My client is a woman who had a drug addiction some years ago, and while she was in the midst of the addiction, she did a lot of prostitution as a way of supporting herself. And so she's got this record of prostitution convictions that now she's looking to ask the Board of Pardon to relieve her from. And she needs to get 3 of the 5 people in this Board of Pardons to recommend that, or 2 of 5 to recommend that she get a public hearing, 3 of them to recommend to the governor that she get a pardon. So it's not a life or death situation like in some of these clemency videos for lifers or people in death row. Nevertheless, my client faces a lot of obstacles in her life as a result of this conviction and convictions. And it occurred to me that this would be a way that we could try to explain my client's life to these people who just have no idea. And I think it worked out quite well. I think anyone looking at this DVD now is going to have a sense of who this person is, who she was, where she's come from. I think it will have quite an impact on her pardon application. Unfortunately, the board's got a very long queue that she's in the middle of, so it's going to take a while yet to find that out. It did some other things that I thought I would mention to you today. One is it allowed a person who has a fairly limited education, but yet is required by this forum to speak on her own. I'm not allowed to write her pardon answers. She is required to answer the questions herself. It allowed her to present her life in a way that mere words would not. And she is not by far the most limited of my clients in terms of expressing herself. She actually wrote a really heartfelt pardon application. Many of my clients are hard-pressed to write 2 sentences on their pardon applications. But, you know, she's not a lawyer, and using words is not the easiest thing for her. I thought being able to show what her life looks like was an immense advantage in this process. A second advantage that it had for her was that she found the entire process extremely empowering. And she has said to me many times, tell Professor Austin that no matter what happens, I will never forget having done this. It felt so good to be able to put my life forward in this positive way. So think about this as something that might help clients in a case such as this, but not only in cases like this. When I was thinking for Regina about what other types of cases we might want to present video evidence in a courtroom or another forum that CLS works in, I thought of SSI cases. Now, we don't have the kind of money that allows us to make day-in-the-life videos like you saw. Nevertheless, if some modified version, some not expensive version, might be very useful in an SSI hearing. And I don't know that that's really been done so far. Another example, landlord-tenant. You know, right now, when we do landlord-tenant cases, we sometimes send our photographer, our still photographer, over to the rat trap apartment. Doesn't quite capture the roaches running up and down the walls. Doesn't give the same flavor as I think it might to send a videographer in. I think that really the future of this for all kinds of cases is as big as our imaginations. I was talking with Steve Pennington out at lunch, and he mentioned, how could we use this in an ADA case? And I said, well, you know, there's all this stuff around proving that you're quote-unquote disabled under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And whether you are disabled depends on how your disability affects your daily life activities. What better way to show your daily life activities? It's a lot better than just sitting there and testifying, my back hurts a lot when I get up in the morning. Another idea that came to me today. I do work in long-term disability cases. I bet a lot of people in this room have long-term disability insurance. You're probably unaware of how unprotected you are by it. It's a process in which the legal process works like this. I get sick, so there's nobody to sue. You know, nobody made me sick. I just, through bad fortune, get sick. I think I've got a policy through Cigna or Liberty Mutual or one of many other companies that's going to protect me and provide income replacement. But the way that claims are decided in this world is that basically they order my medical records, which the doctors may or may not readily send to them. They take almost no information from me. The insurance company itself is making the decision on this claim based on this mostly, 99% paper record, very dull and dry paper record. The only video that's likely to be involved is that they may have sent the surveillance team out, as was discussed earlier this morning. And then when you lose, and I'd be darned, it's hard to find any insurance company that ever thinks somebody is really unable to work. I mean, you can get 60 people who get Social Security disability granted to them, but Cigna doesn't think that they're really all that sick. They could certainly do something. The review is you can file a de novo action in federal court where, well, not a de novo action, you can file a lawsuit in federal court. The standard of review is arbitrary and capricious. Now, for those of you who are lawyers in the room, you know that that means basically no shot in hell, because the judge has very little authority to review anything that's not there in the record. Well, suppose you added to the record something that not only was a dry medical description by a hurried doctor in a file about what was wrong with this person, but you could show some of the issues that this person faces in their daily life. And that was part of the record that went up to the federal judge. I think you would stand a much better chance. So that's only by way of illustration of how, with some creativity, I think that we, public interest lawyers and other lawyers, could really revolutionize the type of law that we practice. And I hope that when I stop talking, other folks will have other ideas that they'll throw out there about potentially how to use this technology. All right. In addition to individual cases, in the public interest world, one of the things that we do is what we call impact advocacy. We're not trying to fix a particular case. We're trying to keep the legislature from passing a stupid bill. Or we're trying to get an administrative agency to change their rules. Something that is often not associated with an individual, but with a group of people that we represent. Anybody who does that work knows that rule number one is you don't talk abstractly, you take people's stories with you. Well, again, when you're a lawyer and what you've learned is to write and to speak, that's cool, but it ain't going to get you real far in this world where people are used to YouTube. So I think we need to start thinking about how do we get our clients' stories to legislators, to the FTC, to whomever we're trying to persuade in a video fashion, which I think is going to intrigue them. They're going to want to watch it. And with the same thing I'm trying to do in my pardon case, where I'm trying to make my client into a real, live, flesh and blood person that they can relate to, that's the same thing that we want to do in these larger forums. So I think that there's a lot of work potentially to be done in that kind of effort. Now, I do want to give one cautionary note about what I see as a potential ethical issue for lawyers in this area, and this came up as well in the case that Regina worked on with me. We as advocates often are looking for the biggest possible exposure for our work product, especially if what we're trying to get is big bang for the buck. And of course the easiest way to do that is to try to put something out there into the public, on the internet, on YouTube, so it's available for all to see. My client, on the other hand, has very different objectives. She is trying to get a pardon so that this criminal record does not follow her for the rest of her life. And I can tell you that I never work on a case now where if there's an important person involved, such as my client, I don't do a Google search. You've got to do a Google search. I found this out at the time that a named plaintiff of mine put into Google, the first thing that popped up was that his occupational license had been revoked for some kind of fraud. You don't want to find that out after you file the case. Anything that goes on the internet is likely to be findable. So if you're working in one of these areas where what you're going to do is put something on the internet that may be exactly contrary to what your client is trying to achieve, which is, in my client's case, is a clean slate to go forward. So it's really difficult because privacy as we used to know it is dead. But sometimes that's really what our clients are banking on, and I just wanted to put that out there. Resources. There are two issues around resources. One is money, and I'm sure a lot of you sat here during this discussion this morning where figures in the thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of dollars are thrown around, and you're thinking, ain't happening. We could hire a receptionist for that. The second thing, though, which is equally important, is know-how. And in my world, we don't tend to get up on the newest trends real fast because we don't have resources. We don't have access to people to teach us to do things. I mean, like this whole thing with the electronic discovery, it's going to be disaster before we all learn this, just because we don't have anyone to teach us this. And I think that that's true a lot of times, that things that in the mainstream legal community are moving along, we're sort of rushing to catch up. So there's the know-how issue along with the financial resource issue. How do we do this? How do we get access to this? Well, certainly, I think the thing that appears most obvious from today's discussion is that we try to make partnerships with people who do have the ability to do this. Whether the law school is going to be able to, on a limited basis, help folks with projects like this, whether Todd's organization can be helpful and others like it. That's one place, obviously, to start, and I think we need to identify who those potential partners are and make relationships with them. Second thing I would say is that in the public interest community, which I represent, which some of my colleagues are in this room, I think we need to pool our resources. I mean, we're not all going to be needing to make videos all the time, but we are quite a group, and I think that if we got it together and we went to certain local foundations and said, this is an important advocacy device that we need to be able to power up, I can imagine there being support for that. Obviously, we would need somebody who would agree to do this, but I can see us pooling our resources so that what any one of our agencies could not do alone, we might be able to do together. Finally, I wanted to say that while Sharon and Marty were speaking this morning, I was thinking about the wonders of co-counseling with lawyers who have greater access and greater expertise than we sometimes do. And I think that was mentioned with some of the pro bono lawyers working in the Norfolk case. When you have a law firm that has resources that takes on a project, they tend to bring some resources along with them aside from their ability to practice law. So I can foresee the day where the Raines-McCarty firm, which I have numerous relationships with, I might say to them, hey, I'm involved in this project. I think we could work together well. I think one of the things you could bring to this is you could help us with the video piece of it. What do you say? And I think that we in the public interest world sometimes forget that that is a possibility that we ought to pursue. So those are my thoughts. I'm hoping that other people have ideas about how we make this happen, and I'd like to hear some creative ideas about things we can do that haven't been discussed so far today. Art, I think you're supposed to come take the microphone.
Sorry. I should know, right? Actually, mine's mostly a question. So it's really to ask.
Still requires the microphone.
It's really to ask someone from Penn to talk about what the resources that are here that we might reach out to as well are, because I think that that would be useful for more of us to understand. And I had the same reaction listening to Marty Brigham. Oh, great! So we'll go to Raines-McCarty and get them to work on these things. But I think it would be really useful for us to know what you're developing here that we might be able to use.
I think I said, and
You need to
go
talk
to the microphone. As I indicated, where did Art go? Oh, as I indicated in my introduction, the university gave us a $60,000 grant to establish a visual media lab. So we have cameras not as fancy as the one back there, but professional cameras, and we also have 6 camcorders like Alex is pointing at me at this point, lights, mics, 2 powerful Macs, double screen Macs for editing with iMovie, iDVD, Final Cut, and whatever the professional DVD program is. We've got students who have been trained to write treatments for law genre nonfiction films, documentaries. And Neil Switzer, who was here but has now left, and who edited one of the films that Ted was talking about, having to do with the hotel workers, is the ITS head of our media lab. We've also developed a relationship with Penn Video Network, who brought us our camera person today, who edited the clemency documentary that was done for Sharon's clients. We've made a commitment to use professional editors and camera people for any product we make that is going to have a larger audience. We are beginning to admit students who have experience in production, in writing and camera work, so that we're going to have more of a professional input from our students. And our students are making little videos of their own, so they're becoming proficient. So it kind of depends on the nature of the product. But
well, let me just throw out a hypothetical.
Okay.
I am on the Pennsylvania Bar Association Committee on Unauthorized Practice of Law, and part of what we are working with the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition around is a campaign to deal with the problem of notary publics engaged in unauthorized practice of immigration law, a serious problem in immigrant communities generally. And part of what we've been struggling with is the means for educating people in multiple languages about those issues. And so one of the things that strikes me in listening to this, and interestingly enough, I think probably 23 years ago, we were told that if we wanted to reach out to the Southeast Asian communities in Philadelphia, the best way to do that was to produce videos and leave them in the little stores around the community, and the people that, because there was then no cable that was available to people, that's how people would actually see messages. The costs then were prohibitive, and we never did it. But I'm sort of curious, is that like a kind of project which Penn might be interested in partnering and working on, thinking out scripts in different languages for fairly simple messages that could be both, they wouldn't all have to be video, some of them could be radio PSAs, for example, but some of them could potentially be video PSAs and release DVD, whatever. Is that a direction that there might be some interest in going?
Yes.
Okay.
And we actually might have students here who could undertake to do the work for a variety of communities in a variety, speaking a variety of languages. So that's something that a university environment can really help you with.
That was so easy. I think the rest of you should run up to the microphone and ask Regina about your pet project. You're missing an opportunity.
I have several more, don't worry.
No, Regina, you are.
This is more of a comment than a question. At lunch today, I think Fernando has left and Anne left, but at lunch today we were talking about a project that Fernando and I are doing on immigration and video. And one of the things I asked him is if in his dealing in deportation, even though he's just filing papers, does he ever include documentaries that are showing, for example, what the person's conditions are in their homeland? And he said no, but he doesn't know if he would be able to submit them. And I said, well, you could try, and I can always provide you with those. So I just want to put a plug in for your libraries, because your librarians may be able to find, they won't be able to help you necessarily in producing your own advocacy, but if you wanted in the form of advocacy to use any documentaries that already exist, as he and I were talking about, then your librarian may be able to help. Or if your library can't, Regina has already mentioned that we have a very sizable collection, and I'm always more than willing to give advice and to lead you towards some titles that might be of help.
And I think that's a perfect example of a situation where I think there's a potential curiosity factor. If I were an immigration judge who didn't usually do that kind of submission, I think I'd be inclined to look at it. And then before you know it, you've created a practice of looking at that sort of thing.
Hi, I'm Judy Bernstein Baker, and when I first heard about this conference, I was very resistant because I looked at the agenda and I said, well, we can't afford that. So we were raising the issues at the very beginning about the difficulty in making a decision between the receptionist or even the attorney and using money for media and those kind of things. So it's really nice to hear that there may be resources here. But it occurred to me, I'm not even sure I could frame this as a question, but a number of the media exercises have been very focused in terms of an audience that they want to sway in public opinion or a particular case humanizing someone. And I was just talking to some folks about the current immigration debate where we're painting whole populations as, terrorists. I mean, I have things that seem to go off the deep edge that are now moving towards mainstream where, people are being painted as very fearful people. And so that the whole notion of having a case decided is very interesting, and I could see how we could sort of use the case. But what I'm more interested about is this messaging that is going out and how we do that public policy argument, and I'd be interested in anybody's thoughts, how we counter the fear and the baseless facts. For example, we were just in Harrisburg, and I think that would have been a great idea to have a video of people, but we were informed that there are 80,000 people on welfare that are getting the incorrect amount, and of course they all must be illegal immigrants, or they could be illegal immigrants, and it kind of planted this seed in people. So I'm just wondering if people have a sense of the broader issues and how to frame that to counter some of that.
Judy, I like your comments more as comments than a question, I think, and people should make comments, and this is not a question form necessarily. I would agree that I think that immigrants are a particular population that is a potentially wonderful recipient of this kind of work. I mean, I think the other group that I represent is people with records. I don't think it's a mere coincidence that among the people we had in the room today were my friends from the Pennsylvania Prison Society, my friends from the National Clearinghouse on Defense of Battered Women, the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project, and criminal defense lawyers and their clemency videos. Part of the power of video can be to try to show people as people, I think, and it's something that we struggle to do. Often we struggle to do it by bringing live people to Harrisburg where they're completely out of their element, if you can get them there at all. I think that being able to film them in their communities, in their daily lives, could be a way to counter that, and it's something worth pursuing.
Yeah, like, just, should probably sit close. Just following up on that idea about filming people in their communities and getting that how do we get that message out? Great example is, like, last week I was reading some blog related to Philadelphia, because, like, I'm the kind of person who reads Philadelphia blogs, right? And there was a video by a guy who lives in Kensington, and he's done a long documentary video series about just interviewing people who live in Kensington. And what I was thinking, I was like, wow, this is so interesting, like normally the only time you see Kensington on the at 11 o'clock news is when somebody's been murdered. And so I thought, this is so great, I feel like I know a lot more about Kensington, but then I thought, like, well, I mean, how many people is this video reaching? So it speaks to what you're talking about, which is like, how do we get the word out? The easiest way, it seems to me, the easiest / hardest is get the local news to cover these stories, but obviously we know that that's darn near impossible these days. So it's just a comment following up on both of what you were saying.
Well, and also the local news covering the story will probably be for 4 minutes, as
Right.
opposed to the
It's a long
25-minute
form, yeah.
film that really makes the points much more cogently.
I'm kind of curious about whether or not anyone knows whether or not we can expect courts to allow access to film parts of trials that are going on. Because I'm interested in measuring the administration of justice, judicial bias, and things of that nature, which you can sometimes see in a transcript, but come across in terms of tone when there's a video camera. And does anyone know if there are a lot of judges that are resisting that kind of thing or open to it? Has anyone tried?
Yeah, hi. I know a little bit about that. Generally, I practice criminal law in New Jersey, and some of our video courtrooms some of our courtrooms are set up for video, and you see the whole, you see the whole case on video, and it becomes part of the record. It's usable. The video fragments or segments are usable for, say, opening statements if there's been a pretrial hearing on video. They're usable in theory for cross-examination if the witness is testified on direct. They're usable on appeals. They're usable in summations where now lawyers on summation will take a segment of their cross-examination and play it on the summation to the jury. See, this is what so-and-so witness said 2 days ago, and there it is. And in terms of the resistance, my thought has been over the years that there's no institution that resists change like the judicial, like the court system, or like the court system. It's lawyers, judges are ensconced in, they're just ensconced in their tradition, their presidents, etc., etc. So enter the whole electronic movement, and the older the judges are, it's a generational divide again, right? The older the judges are, naturally, the less resistance, the most resistance. Obviously, they did all their research in books. Enters a 28-year-old law student who does everything, electronically, research, etc. So as that body of students and that body of professionals move through the system, you can expect a much more friendly attitude toward anything electronic. So there you have it. So on appeal, for example, you have the tape of the witness, and in terms of evaluating the tone, the demeanor, etc., etc. So there you have it.
We're coming to the end of our time. Would you like me to call the question here? Any last thoughts before Professor Austin sends us on our way? Thank you.
And thanks, Sharon, for summing up. We are here as a resource. We are part of a university which we are willing to call on to be a resource to help you. We had a broad spectrum of folks here who at least know that you have an interest and that you have needs. And I'm not abashed at calling up folks I don't know to say, I need some help from you. If you ask for help from me, I'll try and get help from somebody else. Thank you all for sticking around. There are a couple of people I want to thank. Ed Rock, who has been here, who helped me when I was just thinking about doing this, and he told me I could actually do it. Anna Gavin, who is our events coordinator, who has managed to do the administration for this event and has not appeared in this room once because she's doing 10 things on the other side. Oh, there she is. Anna Gavin, thank you for all your hard work. Neil Swisher, who keeps the technology going. and without whom we could not have done this because technology was very important. Our camera person who has been back there, Larry, and who is going to produce a video that you will be able to have as a memento of this event, and which hopefully you'll be able to use to proselytize other people in your offices, other of your classmates, other of your colleagues about the need to really begin to think hard about visual legal advocacy. So once again, thank you for coming, and I hope you don't get too wet going home.